Hello Cancer, and welcome to your in-depth monthly forecast for March 2023 for the Sun or the Ascendant. I'm going to give you some standout issues that I'm going to be discussing, but please stay with me. I will dive deep to give you in forensic detail all the ins and outs particularly relevant to your sign. If you are a returning viewer, thank you so much for joining me once more. If you're new to my channel, it's great to have you with me. Please comment. I interact with all comments. This is very much a community. But also please like and subscribe. So as you come into this new month, the Sun and Neptune are in house 9. Very much to do with adventurism, independence, travel, widening our horizons, being more spontaneous. But there is energy in house 10, how you connect to the wider world. And there's something that could give you a real stroke of fortune right at the start of the month that I need to tell you about. But there's also going to be an interesting financial conversation right at the start of March, which could go either way. It just depends on your circumstances. But I think on balance, it may be to your advantage. Now we're also going to see Mars, the planet of drive and passion, enter your sign for 6 weeks on the 25th. So I can't wait to share that with you, because you've had an extended journey of Mars in the 12th house, which has been far from easy. It began in August last year. But Mars does clash again with Neptune this month for a couple of weeks, an influence that played out through October, November and the first week of December. So that wasn't easy, and that is going to be repeated before you get that wonderful opportunity to thrust forwards. Now we are going to have the spring equinox on the 20th, which is exciting, but before then there is the full moon on the 7th and the little matter of Saturn arriving in your 9th house, followed by Pluto into Aquarius, your 8th house, on the 23rd. So it's an action-packed month, but as the month draws to a close, the window of opportunity that welcomes you into March also sees a window of opportunity as you exit the month, and that's another thing I need to share with you. But if you would like to understand how your personal astrology is impacting on every day of your life, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data, of time, date and place of birth, I can produce your life roadmap report, which will help you to get a much more intimate understanding of those patterns, sometimes the challenging ones that keep coming up, but also helping you to seize opportunities more firmly. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12-month forecast, again totally unique and personal to you. Please see the link beneath this video for more on that. So Cancer, as you come into March, there may be a desire in some ways to shake things up, to do something different, spontaneous, especially if you're somebody who does like a degree of change and spontaneity. Most Cancer people have a deep appreciation of security, but security is something that we feel deep within ourselves. So while some people may be very much home lovers, which is a wonderful thing, other people may feel their sense of peace and tranquility by doing something that's quite daring, traveling a lot, for example. So it just depends on your unique personality, but I think you may be minded to switch things up a little bit. But the combination between Jupiter and Venus in the first week, but it's exact on the second, can be really lucky. But it also coincides with Mercury combining with Saturn in house 8, also across the first couple of days. Now they're coming together in your long-term financial zone. Is this something to do with your professional situation? Is there going to be an offer or an opportunity? I really hope so for you. If the limitation of Saturn makes you feel that finances are tightening, I feel a preparedness to try different approaches is going to work to your advantage. So maybe you could apply skills and experiences and knowledge that you've accumulated over a long period of time in a slightly different setting. And that's where the ninth house energy at the start of this month can be so helpful to you. But on the 2nd, Mercury then moves into Pisces, joining up with the Sun and also Neptune. Now, of course, they're going to be joined by Saturn on the 7th. Now, Saturn is a whole different kettle of fish, as they would say, because as much as the Sun and Mercury will see you wanting to gain knowledge, experiment, be more free-spirited, Saturn, of course, can be limited. But if you are, for example, wanting to go back, perhaps learn some new skills, perhaps by distance learning, through online courses, or go to a higher education institution, or even do something to do with professional training or evolving in that environment, this can be a really important month, to be honest. The information you gain informally, online, or in a more learned setting can actually be very invaluable to you. But the full moon that happens on the 7th is asking you to think very much about your everyday ideas and whether your everyday ideas are blocking you being open to new and more exciting vistas. We can all relate to our belief systems. The problem is it can give us an unconscious bias, so we can reject opportunities because somehow or another we decide we're not going to go for them because it doesn't suit us. So in other words, the concept of control comes in. And that is one thing that I feel that your sign, every sign has its absolute strengths. Yours is as a brilliant manager of resources or businesses or institutions, of people, but it can be the perception that you can be a little bit controlling at times. And perhaps there's going to be a conversation that comes up on this particular full moon in the following 2 weeks where someone can challenge you in a more provocative way about some of your fixed ways of going about things. Part of the reason is that Uranus, which has been asking you to be much more experimental in recent years, is really provoking you almost to have some challenging conversations, because through those challenging conversations perhaps you can see that some of your ideas have actually got a little bit stale and you're protecting them because it suits you, and this is where the unconscious bias may be coming in. However, Jupiter and Chiron are also linking in a less positive way to this full moon, so some home truths could be shared. Maybe you're going to surprise somebody by being more direct. You have a reputation of disliking confrontation, but you may find that you will have to stand your ground or assert your boundaries, or someone's going to do that to you across those 2 weeks. But Saturn moving into the 9th house suggests that someone could challenge some of your philosophies. The 9th house is about the higher truth. Saturn is about authority. So watch out if you are coming into contact with, for example, legal agencies. It's not a time to take shortcuts around any kind of interface with a big institution, whether it's through the government or whatever. Also, Saturn moving into the 9th house could see you feeling a little bit limited in some ways over the next couple of years. But what it will do is help you to understand why you say no to certain opportunities to expand. And it may be because at some level you're being protective, which is entirely understandable. We all do it. But that's what other people could challenge within you. Now, I mentioned before that Mars is going to be squaring up with Neptune at the heart of this month in week 2 and 3, and your vitality and emotional energy could drop. But Mars does actually emerge from its post-shadow period right at the heart of this month on the 15th, and the retrograde actually ended on the 12th of January, so this has been a long old process. It only happens every 2.5 years, Mars retrograde, but it's a long pattern. Now on the 25th it's going to move into your sign, and that is going to help you to emerge, feel a lot stronger and a lot more assertive. Mars in the 12th house is a very deeply psychological influence. It can stir up anger, but it can also stir up tears. And I just think Mars coming out of shadow will be helpful. But the 12th, 9th house angle between Neptune, which in the 9th house can expand our imagination, but not necessarily in a particularly logical way. That's not being offensive to you. That's just what Neptune can do in the 9th house. And of course the 12th house is very tender, and Mars is a very triggering influence. So just be aware at the heart of this month that you could sort of overreact a little bit if you're not careful to some tender strands. But the 16th sees Venus move into your sector of friendship. On the face of it, lovely. It also forges a great link to Saturn. You may decide to get together with some very dear friends and go away for some kind of expedition, brief weekend, whether it's to a spa, something that's, very therapeutic, wouldn't be a surprise. But can also be some jolly moments in there. But perhaps also you'll be thinking about your long-term future. Venus isn't just about relationships, it's about money. And Saturn moving into the 9th house could ask you to expand, but in a very well thought through and constructive way, Saturn. However, Venus does square up with Pluto, which is just about to leave your opposite sign, where it's caused huge impact for you since 2008. There may have been some big relationships that have gone out of your world, but it's now preparing to go into your deep dive 8th house, very psychological. You won't really get going until the end of 2024, to be honest. It's going to be in Aquarius for 11 weeks this year, 38 weeks next year in 2 phases. And once it comes out of that second phase, that's when you're really going to feel its energy. If you're born early in Cancer, what's going to happen is you have a quincunx between your Sun and Pluto, especially if you're particularly early, and that can cause some complexities, but it can also give you a great sense of desire. So if you're someone who would like to have an increase in your sex life, well, that's certainly going to help. Ironically, if your Sun is more towards the end of Cancer and more towards the beginning of Leo, what you're getting here is much more an opposition, and that can have a big impact on your relationships. But on the 19th, Mercury punches through into its 3rd home of the month and goes high in the sky in your 10th house, joining up initially with Jupiter. Now on the 20th we have the spring equinox, one, if not the most important moment of the whole astrological year, because this is the start of Cardinal Quadrant 1. The Western tropical zodiac is based on the seasons, not on the moving constellations. And so this is a fresh beginning for us all. But for you, it's when each year you think very much about your goals and ambitions. With Mercury there as well, and the lucky Jupiter, this gives you opportunities. It's just that the new moon on the 21st in Aries, ordinarily a springboard to success, is squaring up with Mars, which is nearly arrived in your sign. So if you try to dominate any situations where you're trying to be very individualistic, you could receive pushback from people in positions of authority, the bank manager, the business consultant, the investor, your partner, your parents. So you have to balance your need to do what you want to do with a kind of appreciation of perhaps other people's role in supporting you. But the 23rd does see Pluto get into the sign of Aquarius, but it is forging a quincunx to Mars. That's not going to do your sexual desire any harm either, but it could see a little bit of conflict if your desire to do your own thing, which is going to be strengthened by the arrival of Mars in your sign on the 25th, is dependent on in some shape or another on someone else's financial support, or the deep investment of faith in what you're trying to do that's a little bit different. So I think there may be part of you that wants to be much bolder and much more assertive in the second phase of this month. And the first phase of the month is very much about knowledge. But as you come to the end of the month, Mars is going to give your physical vitality a big lift. But then the speed in Mercury aligns with the residing Jupiter in your 10th house. If you don't get that stroke of fortune at the start of the month with Venus and Jupiter together, you could get it at the end of the month, and it may be of the professional kind. But balancing, Mars can give you a lot of desire to go for things, which is great, but you're going to have to conform to the structure of this particular role that comes up for you unless you do your own thing. Now, if you want to be self-employed, start your own enterprise, or you're already in one, I think the planets are really good for you this month, to be honest. It's just Saturn moving into the 9th house and that full moon are going to ask some questions if your thinking tends to be quite calibrated towards your need to do what you want for yourself, rather than being a bit more logical and seeing the big picture as others may perceive it. That's difficult for me to say. I'm a very Cancerian person myself because I have a lot of 4th house in my chart. The moon, Venus, Chiron, all in the 4th house. In Draconic astrology, my moon and Venus are in Cancer, and my midpoint is at 0 degrees in Cancer. So a very Cancerian person, a big love of home, and we all like to have a degree of control over our own situation, but I think it's where you're interfacing with others that some of the tensions could come up this month, but lots of opportunities too. Thank you so much for joining me. Please comment. I interact with every comment, like or subscribe.